There's no denying the impact that classic lower trucks bring to the table, as they can definitely tickle all the senses. But there is one major catch that lies right beneath the surface, and that's the fact that things break. The question is, how do you repair a truck that is considered rare these days? With that being said, are original parts best, or are aftermarket parts a good alternative? Well, let's dig in. Well, hello my friends, Kevin here, and before we get any further with the discussion of repairing old vehicles, I think we should make it clear on what the definition of a classic truck is. The general rule of thumb here is that any vehicle 25 years of age is considered classic, as that's the threshold for most DMV and insurance companies. This means that the early models of the second gen Ford Lightning are in the classic range, and others like the Chevy Silverado SS and Dodge Ram SRT10 are on the verge of falling into this category as well. This is a bit odd for me to put into perspective, as just in the past few years, OBS Chevy trucks have finally become celebrated as being great trucks of the past. Yet the later 99 to 07 NBS full-size GM pickups are becoming classic now, but have not been given the respect they deserve. And honestly, the NBS or GMT 800 model is hands down one of the best trucks ever made in my opinion. But that's a whole different subject I'll leave for another day. Anyways, if you pick up one of these trucks, you are bound to have worn out or broken parts, leaving you to find sources outside of dealerships, as most manufacturers stop making or carrying replacement parts after 10 years. I have a weird story that is related to all of this. So about 10 years ago, I was at the wrong place and wrong time when I unfortunately got hit in the streets of Compton, California. Luckily, I was unharmed, but my '07 Chevy NBS truck was wounded, and surprisingly enough, the repair shop could not find a replacement door panel or seat cover. So we turned to eBay to find the parts. Now this was a bit of a shock to me, as this particular truck was only 8 years in age, and I considered it relatively new at the time. On top of that, the Chevy Silverado is one of the most popular trucks ever made, and I couldn't fathom the thought that sourcing new replacement parts for my truck would be such a big issue. And this just goes to show that finding parts for trucks that aren't even considered classic can be an issue too. Then when you take into account how old some of the vintage trucks that we like are, you can get a clear picture on how much of a task this can all be. Alright, now that we've made it clear what a classic truck is and how hard it can be to find parts for them, let's discuss the three major types of classic trucks, as this will dictate how you go about making repairs. These categories include restorations, Restomods, and full customs. Once you can identify which fits your truck, it will help you decide which route is best for your truck. I would have to say that restoring a truck to look like it did the day it came off the dealership lot can be one of the most difficult ways to build a truck. Now, you can use aftermarket parts for most of these trucks, but this does depend on how meticulous you want to get. If you can find good reproductions, or what we call repop parts, they can be considered good alternatives to the originals for most enthusiasts. However, for those that are obsessed with keeping trucks all original, it can be quite difficult to maintain them. The highest versions would be concourse vehicles that compete at high-level events where every small detail matters. For these, I believe it is required to find new old stock, also known as NOS parts, which are basically original overstock parts that were never used. Just imagine having a headlight go out on one of these vehicles and looking for a true original. Yeah, that can be a big issue. But some people like the challenge, and I say if that floats your boat, happy hunting. So I don't want to elaborate on restorations any further, as I rarely deal with them, as full custom trucks are definitely more popular these days. This change came about 10 years ago, as mint condition and numbers matching vehicles were getting fewer bids at the big auctions. I'm not sure why things switched, but fabrication work on custom trucks started to be held to a higher level than ever before. On top of that, these head-turning haulers became more reliable, which led enthusiasts to have more trust in their construction. Owners of mild and wild custom trucks are not only open to using aftermarket parts, but they are also more open to deviating from their truck's original form. Many customizers are not afraid of making big leaps of faith in modifying their rides to complete a vision. What I think has also helped as of late is the offering of better designed suspension and chassis systems, along with advanced engine and performance packages to make them run with ease. And let me tell you this, I am all about improvements that can benefit your classic truck driving experience. Yeah, we may be fond of these old haulers, but if you haven't driven one, they can take a bit of extra effort to pilot around town. It's the sole reason I am shelling out some coin to have my friends at Old Anvil Speed Shop swap in a TCI coilover chassis with an LS engine into my 62 GMC. Once all is said and done, my truck will ride and drive like a brand new vehicle, and I can hardly wait. Anyways, filling in the gap between these two extremes is Restomods, and I think people have gotten confused on what they actually are. In my opinion, I define them as any classic vehicle that maintains the original look with a few modern features. Some people may think they are working on a restoration project, but the moment they change something like the engine, suspension, or wheels, they are really creating a Restomod. Just like with full customs, I think aftermarket parts are a good choice for these trucks as they don't have to be comprised of all original components like true restorations require. When it comes to sourcing these parts, I would trust LMC Truck, Brothers Trucks, Classic Industries, and Premier Street Rod for the best quality reproductions. I know there is some skepticism about repop parts, but you must understand that the original versions didn't fit perfectly either. This goes especially for exterior body panels as they must be modified to achieve the fitment we expect. Nonetheless, I do think that aftermarket parts are a good alternative to originals, but just expect to use some finesse to make them fit. Of course, original parts are definitely superior, but it's becoming way harder to find good condition used replacements. If you haven't been to a junkyard lately, I can tell you that they are mostly filled with vehicles from the early 2000s and later. What I would recommend is finding a good specialty salvage yard that stockpiles old truck parts. But even those are hard to come across, as I have even witnessed some close over the years. Fortunately, there are way more options these days for aftermarket parts than ever before, but I will say that there are still models that get forgotten when it comes to the availability of repop parts. I clearly remember having a conversation about all this with my buddy Umberto of Vulcan Specialties in Texas. Anyways, he built a stunning classic Dodge dually, and he said he ran across some challenges on the build as no one makes parts for certain segments, like the trim for the rear door windows. In these cases, you may have to get really creative here. On the other hand, there are a few trucks that can be built entirely from scratch. And honestly, I think these kits are a great solution as most trucks have some damage that will not only take more funds to complete, but will take more time during the process of making the proper repairs. In the long run, aftermarket parts can make your life less complicated than dealing with damaged originals. With so many parts available these days, one must ponder if building from scratch has the same value as building with all original parts. Recently, I had an interesting conversation with Jason Noel of Fat Fender Garage as he told me he is hesitant to build an entire classic truck from scratch. To him, there must be some major original components to really call these builds classic trucks. Even though the results will look great to most, some builders prefer to keep original parts to give them some peace of mind that their builds are legit classic trucks. On a related note, when Velocity Restorations lent me one of their 67 Ford F100 offerings, I knew that only the cap steel was original and everything else was new. Even though this was the case, I didn't mind driving around in a truck that was almost all built from scratch. And when done correctly like this, these trucks can fetch big money, and it just goes to prove that they can definitely hold some value. To the purists out there, a truck like this is simply outrageous and not the right way of doing things. I say, if most others have a hard time distinguishing what is new or original, why not save on labor and money during the course of the build? With that being said, my friends at Premier Street Rod don't seem to have problems selling their complete Chevy and C10 body kits. Honestly, if you are going to build a full show quality truck, I think this is the best route as you won't have to deal with damaged old steel. And you can check out a video I did on one of their trucks by clicking the link in the description. In the end, when it comes to finding replacements for broken parts on old trucks, it comes down to what your needs are. Like I said, good originals can work best if you can find them. I say if you're not building a complete nut and bolt restoration, utilizing new parts can be very helpful. So I wouldn't get hung up on not being able to use all original components on your old truck. With that being said, I wish all of you good luck on building the truck of your dreams. Well, that just about does it for this video, and we thank you for watching it. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a future video, and we will catch you next time.